Today, you're about to hear 3 of the strangest true mysteries ever recorded. A missing woman in Taiwan whose body was found in the most horrifying way imaginable. A deeply religious man who walked into the Alaskan wilderness, boarded up his cabin, and vanished. And a young pilot whose final radio call over the Bass Strait still terrifies investigators to this day. 3 people, 3 disappearances, and 3 chilling questions that remain unanswered. Stay with me because by the end, you'll be asking yourself the same thing. What really happened to them? One wrong floor, a horrifying elevator tragedy. At 8:30 p.m. on August 20, 2010, a 76-year-old man named John was finishing his evening walk in New Taipei City, Taiwan. After a slow stroll, he headed back to his daughter's apartment, where he was staying at the time. Just outside the building, a large poster on a street lamp caught his eye. It was a missing person notice. On the poster was the face of a middle-aged woman named Kunyonui. The text below said she had been missing for a week, last seen during an evening walk. What struck John the most was that Kun actually lived in this very building. She was a dementia patient who stayed in a memory care unit on the 5th floor, but one evening she never returned. Since then, her family, neighbors, and the police had been searching desperately, plastering missing posters everywhere. No one had found her. John had never met Kun, but something about her sad story made him stop. He stared at her photo, memorizing her face just in case he ever saw her, so he could alert the police. Then he stepped into the building, pressed the elevator button, and waited. Ding! The doors slid open. He got in, intending to ride up to the 7th floor. But without realizing it, he had pressed the button for the 6th floor instead. As the elevator slowed to a stop, John noticed his mistake and quickly pressed 7. The doors slid open at floor 6, and that's when John froze. What he saw made his blood run cold. He let out a scream so loud it echoed down the hallway. Shaking violently, John fumbled for his phone and called his daughter. When she answered, all she could hear was her father screaming, "Help me! I'm trapped! Something's in this elevator! I can't take it!" Terrified, she immediately called the building staff and the police. Then she raced home, expecting her father to be safe. 40 minutes later, she rushed through the lobby doors. But instead of relief, she saw police still gathered around the elevators. Her father had not been rescued. An officer pulled her aside. "Your father isn't stuck because of a technical malfunction. The elevator is working fine, but inside that cabin, there's something. And the only way out is if he moves it himself." She was confused until they explained, and when she heard the truth, her face went pale. Now she understood why her father was so hysterical. When the doors had opened on the 6th floor, something had fallen straight into John, pinning him to the ground. It wasn't an object, it was a body. The stiff, rigid corpse of Kun, the missing woman on that poster, was half in the elevator, half out. She had been dead for days. Her body, locked in rigor mortis, was blocking the doors from closing. John was paralyzed with terror. Police shouted, "Just push her out of the way. The doors will close, the elevator will move." But he couldn't. He sobbed and shouted, "No, I can't. I can't touch her." Finally, his daughter took the phone, crying, pleading, "Dad, you have to do it, for me. Just this once, be strong." Shaking, sobbing, John summoned what little strength he had. He pressed his hands against Kun's cold, rigid body and shoved her aside. The doors finally slid shut, and the elevator carried him down to the lobby. When the doors opened, John stumbled out, pale and trembling, his clothes disheveled. Officers rushed past him, straight into the elevator, surrounding the corpse. The investigation revealed the grim truth. A week earlier, Kun had not wandered off into the streets like everyone thought. She had returned to the building. She wanted to go to the 5th floor, but she pressed the 6th by mistake. Now, the 6th floor wasn't like the others. It was a private residence. The owner, paranoid about intruders, had installed a heavy metal gate directly in front of the elevator. So when Kun stepped out, she found herself trapped between the locked gate and the closed elevator doors. The elevator buttons were on the other side of the gate. She was stuck in a narrow space, a hidden cage no one could see or hear from. And no one came. The owner of the apartment was away on vacation. Kun screamed for help, but her cries were muffled. For 5 long days, she survived without food or water until her strength gave out. Alone, she died in that tiny space. Her body remained there, upright, stiff, for days until the night John pressed the wrong button, and the doors opened. Her corpse fell into him, setting off one of the most horrifying elevator encounters imaginable. In the end, the homeowner was not criminally charged for installing the gate, but he was ordered to compensate Kun's family nearly $100,000 for creating the deadly trap that led to her death. The pilot who vanished into the Bass Strait. In 1978, a young pilot took off on a routine night flight over the Bass Strait in Australia. Minutes later, he radioed that a mysterious craft was circling him. Then came a metallic grinding sound and silence. Neither the pilot nor his plane was ever seen again. Frederick Volentich was just 20 years old, but aviation was his passion. He had applied twice to the Royal Australian Air Force and failed. He tried for commercial airlines and failed again, but his wealthy father paid for private lessons, and finally, Frederick earned his license. On October 21, 1978, Frederick set out from Melbourne in a small plane, heading to King Island. It wasn't the destination that excited him, it was the fact that this was his first solo night flight. For a young man who dreamed of flying, this was a milestone. As the city lights faded behind him and the black expanse of the Bass Strait stretched ahead, Frederick felt unstoppable. But at 7:06 p.m., things got strange. Frederick noticed a bright light behind him 3,000 or 4,000 feet back. In the darkness, over open water, this was unnerving. At first he assumed it was another plane, but it was far too close. Panic set in. If he was off course, he could lose his license. If they were off course, he could die in mid-air collision. And then he realized this plane was moving way too fast. It wasn't just following, it was gaining on him. Frederick radioed Melbourne Air Traffic Control. "There's an aircraft behind me. It's getting closer. What should I do?" The controller checked the radar. Then calmly replied, "There are no other aircraft in your area. You're completely alone." But Frederick wasn't alone. By now, the light was right on his tail, and suddenly, it did something no plane could ever do. It orbited his aircraft, whipping around him in circles, impossibly fast. Frederick's engine began sputtering. His voice over the radio grew frantic as he described what he was seeing. Air traffic controller Steve Roby later said Frederick sounded panicked, almost incoherent. He described a strange craft circling him as his engine failed. And then Steve heard it. A loud metallic grinding sound blasted through the radio, drowning Frederick out. And then, silence. That was the last anyone ever heard from Frederick Volentich. Search teams scoured the Bass Strait. They found nothing. No wreckage, no oil slick, no body. Frederick and his plane had simply vanished. The official explanation: investigators claimed Frederick, inexperienced and flying at night over dark waters, might have gotten disoriented. They suggested he accidentally flew his plane upside down, mistook his own reflection in the water as another aircraft, and eventually crashed. But come on, would a trained pilot really fly upside down without realizing it? For that long, it seems absurd. And then there's the bigger problem: the Bass Strait itself, the Bass Strait Triangle. For decades, before Volentich's flight, the Bass Strait had a reputation. Strange lights, UFO reports, mysterious disappearances. So many that people began calling it the Bass Strait Triangle, Australia's version of the Bermuda Triangle. And Frederick's case fit the pattern all too well. Here's what chills me most. We have his voice, his words, recorded forever. A young man describing something impossible, something orbiting his plane moments before he vanished. It's one thing to hear rumors about UFOs, it's another to hear a pilot's final call for help, cut off by a sound that no one can explain. So what happened that night? Did Frederick crash by mistake? Or was he taken by something not of this world? All we know is that a 20-year-old pilot went flying over the Bass Strait and never came back. The sky that night should have been empty, but something was waiting for him out there, and to this day, the Bass Strait keeps its secret. The pilot who vanished into the Bass Strait. In 2018, a deeply religious man walked alone into the Alaskan wilderness carrying nothing but a cell phone, a few pounds of oatmeal, and his faith in God. 3 months later, his cabin was found perfectly clean, neatly stocked, and boarded shut from the outside. And the man, gone. What happened to him is one of the strangest wilderness mysteries of our time. On the morning of August 18, 2018, 41-year-old Vladimir Kostenko stepped out of a taxi onto a remote dirt road in the Alaskan backcountry. Civilization was miles behind him. Ahead lay endless forest, brutal weather, and wild predators. The driver leaned out one last time. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Vladimir smiled. "I'll be fine. Don't worry about me." But the truth was, almost nobody thought he'd be fine. A life of faith over reason. Vladimir had been born in Russia, but in his 20s, he fled to the US after being persecuted for his Christian faith. In Washington state, he lived like a monk. Long fasts, constant prayer, little money, and endless trust that God would provide. His friends admired his conviction but worried about his choices. When he announced he was heading into Alaska to find his purpose, they begged him to take a gun or at least bear spray. Vladimir refused. He said the only protection he needed was God. And here's the thing, sometimes faith can give people immense strength. But in the Alaskan wild, faith alone doesn't keep the grizzlies away. A friend of his, Dmitry Krin, owned a remote cabin in Alaska. It was cozy, fully furnished, with a wood stove and enough food to last 3 years. Dmitry rarely used it, so when Vladimir confessed he was feeling lost, Dmitry offered him the cabin. Go there, disconnect from the world, stay as long as you need. And so, Vladimir set off. But here's the catch, the taxi didn't drop him at the cabin. It left him 14 miles away, with no trail, no map, just wilderness. Most people would turn back right there, Vladimir. He shouldered his backpack, smiled, and started walking. At first, things went well. Vladimir hiked to the cabin, settled in, and every couple of days he'd climb a mountain nearby to catch cell service and text Dmitry. He was meditating, praying, eating berries. He joked about a pesky squirrel stealing his food. It sounded like the spiritual retreat was working. But then 6 weeks in, the messages stopped. Days turned into weeks. Dmitry reassured himself. Maybe the solar charger wasn't working in the fading autumn light. Maybe Vladimir's phone was dead, but in his gut, something felt wrong. So in early November, Dmitry flew his small plane over the area. Using a camera mounted under the aircraft, he scanned the trees until the little cabin came into view. It looked fine, smoke curled from the chimney. And then relief, Vladimir stepped outside. He put his hands on his hips, looked up, and waved recognition, connection, proof of life. Dmitry dropped supplies. Vladimir picked them up, waved again as if to say thank you, I'm okay. Dmitry turned back, confident his friend was safe. But that would be the last confirmed sighting of Vladimir Kostenko. 2 months later, December in Alaska is unforgiving. Freezing winds, endless snow, weeks of darkness. And on top of it all, a massive earthquake had just rattled the region. When Dmitry flew back over the cabin, he expected to see smoke again. Instead, the chimney was capped with snow. No fire had burned there in days. He dropped supplies, circled low, even buzzed the cabin with his engine roar. But nobody came outside. And here's the chilling part. Without fire, no one could survive in that cabin for long. It would be like sleeping in a freezer. Dmitry panicked. He reported Vladimir missing, but the state troopers, they weren't convinced. Maybe Vladimir had left, maybe he was out hunting. Launching a full search in deadly weather felt too risky. To the family, this felt like abandonment. To Dmitry, it felt like a nightmare. 3 days later, Dmitry hired a private helicopter and landed as close as he could. Snow was piled against the cabin door, no footprints, no sign of life. And then he saw something bizarre. The door wasn't just closed. It was boarded shut from the outside with a sheet of metal. Think about that. Who seals their own door from the outside before walking into the wilderness? Dmitry tore off the metal and stepped inside. The cabin was pristine. Food still on the shelves, firewood stacked neatly. No signs of struggle, no chaos. Almost as if Vladimir had tiddied up and walked out forever. And then Dmitry noticed something stranger. The firewood was labeled, handwritten notes on the logs. One read, frankincense aroma, do not burn. Frankincense, a substance used in religious rituals since ancient times. Was Vladimir conducting some kind of spiritual experiment? Was he cataloguing woods by their sacred scents? We'll never know. The man who disappeared into belief. The evidence ends there. Vladimir sealed his cabin, left behind food, warmth, safety and stepped into the wilderness unarmed, underprepared, and alone. Searchers turned up nothing. Rumors surfaced. Sightings in Hawaii, in Oregon, all false. The final, indisputable image of Vladimir Kostenko remains, that grainy video feed from Dmitri's plane. A man standing on the porch, waving up at his friend, alive and well. And then nothing. Here's what chills me most. When most of us think of survival, we think of gear, knives, fire, shelter. But for Vladimir, survival wasn't about tools, it was about faith. He believed God would guide him, but the wilderness is indifferent. It doesn't bend to faith, or science, or anything else, it simply is. So maybe Vladimir found his purpose in those woods, maybe he found peace, or maybe he was swallowed whole by the very silence he went searching for. One wrong choice in Alaska can end a life, but one boarded-up door has left behind a mystery. And somewhere out there, in the endless cold, the question lingers: what really happened to Vladimir Kostenko? 3 mysteries. 3 people who vanished without answers. And the truth, maybe it's still out there. Which story chilled you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more strange and terrifying stories like these, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because the next mystery might be even darker. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.